Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TradeStation Masterclass. It's great to be here. My name is Jesus Nava. I'm the Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities, and it's always a pleasure to talk a little bit about TradeStation. Today is EasyLanguage, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to, put programming code together so that you can make TradeStation do what you're looking for, the software to do. So we're going to talk about some EasyLanguage Elements, how to program EasyLanguage studies. So technically, it is a programming class. So I want everybody just to feel comfortable. We're going to go through some advanced concepts that you're probably not familiar with, but that's the whole reason why we do these classes. We want to connect with everyone that's using TradeStation and make sure that they're using all the power that's been implemented on the software. Today, specifically, we're going to talk about Paintbar studies and how to write them. So we're going to take a look at a couple simple examples, and I'm going to be open up here in the chat just in case anybody has any questions, and that way we can clarify some of the challenges that we all face, in EasyLanguage. So welcome everyone to class. As I said earlier today, we're going to highlight Paintbars. I'm not sure if you've used them before, so we're going to take a look at some examples that are built in and how you can create one from scratch. So before we get started, here's the usual disclosures. Just keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about is for educational purposes only. These are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, that active trading is not suitable for everyone, and that past historical performance is no guarantee of future results. We have a link right there that I encourage everyone to visit if you need a little bit more details on these disclosures, www.tradestation.com/important-information. All right, guys, thank you so much. There is a PDF that I created around this presentation that Manolo is going to share here in the chat. If you've been with us sometime, you know that Manolo is my colleague, and he's going to work and moderate the chat for us here. So if you have any questions, if you're looking for specific links, Manolo is just standing by to answer those. Jim is asking, is John Brooke coming up in some future class? John, I'm sorry, Jim. Yeah, recently, John Brooke has had some issues come up, some personal issues. And unfortunately, we had to cancel some of the more upcoming classes that he was doing for that reason. So eventually, later on down the road, we may have him back. For the time being, I'm trying to work with the EasyLanguage support team to have maybe a substitute that can join us and talk a little bit more to the advanced nature of EasyLanguage, because I know that a lot of the things that made John's session attractive was the fact that he was he was capable of diving deeper into TradeStation's programming and provide you guys with great information. But at the present moment, you probably see that when you go to the events page, we have no classes for John Brooke, and that's the reason why we don't have them yet. So hopefully, we can have him back, because that's one of the classes that I enjoy a lot doing. So thank you for asking, Jim. Let's go ahead and talk about what are Paintbar studies. Paintbar studies are designed to identify bars that meet specific market conditions based on a defined set of rules. So you set the rules, you set the conditions, and TradeStation is going to change the color of the bar. It can be an open, high, low, close bar. It can be a candlestick bar. Whatever type of bar you use, it'll change the color of that bar based on the condition and based on the color that you specify. They help you visualize or identify or visually identify conditions you're looking for historically and line up in combination with other studies. A lot of times, we have studies that take up real estate in your charts. And sometimes, having a condition that colors specific candles is more than enough to know that a condition is met. And you probably don't need, a full-blown study taking up space instead of your chart, like for example, MACD or RSI. If you want to know specific bars that are overbought or oversold, you probably don't need a whole RSI study at the bottom. Maybe that's one of the examples we're going to create today. You know, how can we use some of the programming techniques that are available in TradeStation to help you in your market analysis, in your organization of the TradeStation tools. But they are used to capture valuable chart real estate, and we'll get to that in a little moment. So some elements before we go on to programming a custom Paintbar. EasyLanguage is made up of specific words that it understands. We have reserved words and we have functions that are built into the language, and EasyLanguage and TradeStation understand what those words are. So if you type in a word that comes up and is automatically colored in blue or magenta, it's because TradeStation knows what it is. It has a particular meaning, and it'll do something very specific. So that's one of the things that helps, you know, EasyLanguage programmers know exactly how to put things together, because a lot of the language is already created for you. It's just a matter of knowing how to piece it together. And also the EasyLanguage punctuation is something that everyone that is writing EasyLanguage needs to be aware of. So if EasyLanguage syntax is looking for a semicolon, everybody has to use a semicolon. You cannot replace this with a period or a comma, because EasyLanguage will generate an error, will probably not understand what you're trying to do. And worse yet, you may have a wrong calculation without even knowing. So a lot of times we do have to be aware of the punctuations that are available for you to use and how to apply those punctuations so that EasyLanguage, you know, works accurately. Variables, we're going to use variables in our custom show me's. They're used to store information. I see variables are as little containers that allow you to house a particular definition or particular formula, so that throughout the code, you don't have to type up the formula or type up the condition. You can just reference the variable for readability. So variables are giving us a descriptive name, so you know exactly what they are and how they're calculated. And they do increase readability, because instead of having all these formulas scattered all over your code, you have a word that is very descriptive. It means something to you, and you know exactly what is behind that word. For example, this is just an example. And of course, variables must be declared in order for you to use them inside of EasyLanguage. These are words that you're pretty much making up and making EasyLanguage recognize as programming words. So the first thing you need to do is declare them. So you say, hey, EasyLanguage, I'm about to use these words, and this is the type of words they are. So for example, in this last line you see here in this PowerPoint slide, variables is a word that comes in blue because it's something that, you know, EasyLanguage knows what it is. It's a reserved word, and it's a word we use to declare other words that we're going to be using. For example, this word AVG, I look at the abbreviation and I know that's an average, but that's a word that I'm making up, and I'm telling EasyLanguage I'm going to start using the word AVG, and AVG is going to be a number. That 0 that you have inside of parentheses tells EasyLanguage that that variable is numeric, meaning that it's going to hold a number. Sometimes we use input parameters, and inputs are ways in which you can build some sort of interface between the front end, which is the TradeStation platform, and the back end, which is EasyLanguage. So rather than having to go to EasyLanguage to make edits, you can use the input parameters to open up, you know, the functionality of your study and make changes to those parameters. That's pretty much how inputs work and how they're and why they exist in EasyLanguage, for you to have that interface and be able to modify the calculation. So there are set our user set values that are passed into a function or a calculation. They may be used in your code to dynamically change the calculation or functionality of your study. They're also giving a descriptive name, and they also have to be declared. So yeah, there are similarities between inputs and variables in the way that you declare them and you use them, but there are some very marked differences. For example, inputs they start off at a particular value. So this input, by the way, didn't mention that input was a reserved word, but it is. Notice that it's painted blue. When you type up the word input inside the editor, the Easy Language editor, it comes up in blue. But AVGLEN is something that the user makes up, does not exist in the code. And one way that you can know for sure that it doesn't exist is because it doesn't acquire a specific color. It stays black. So if something turns blue or turns magenta, you know that that's a reserved word or something that TradeStation already has built in. But if something is black, it's because it's not part of the code, and you can probably use that as one of your words. One thing that we do recommend is don't use a name that already exists in the language if what you're trying to do is create your own word. You know what I'm saying? So we don't want to create a conflict. So if you're declaring your inputs or declaring your variables, and all of a sudden your word comes up in blue or magenta, you probably want to stay away from those words because they have a specific meaning already, and you don't want to create some contradictions in your code. So as long as it comes up in black, it's a word that you can use. And notice that inside parentheses, we provide a 20, which is a starting point for that input, but it just creates that interface for you to be able to go to the front end, similar to when you edit studies, like a moving average, and you go to edit studies and you go to the inputs and you change the parameters. This is exactly what creates that interface, the inputs declaration. So this is an example of code that we're going to use for a Paintbar. Vars is just an abbreviation of variables. So you can use the full word variables or vars, and it's going to be exactly the same. And this is my declaration of my variables. And the variable that this code is going to be using is something called DN bar for down bar. And notice that inside parentheses, we see the word false. So this is different than the one we saw in the previous example. On the previous example, we saw a 0 inside parentheses because now that's a way for you to tell Easy Language that the variable you're about to use is numeric. In this particular case, though, the fact that we're using the word false inside parentheses makes the variable a true false variable. So whatever it's going to be contained inside this variable is going to be a true false expression. It's going to be either true or false. It's not a number, it's a true or false expression, and that's how you create a variable that's going to hold that true false expression. There's a couple of questions here in the chat. Let me go ahead and take them as we are progressing. How to define multiple variables like total, etc. I want to define a bunch of variables. If you want to do a series of variables, Venu, all you need to do is add a comma instead of a semicolon that you see right here at the very end. That's the end of the statement. But if you have multiple variables to declare, just make sure you separate them with a comma. So in this case would be down bar, then false inside parentheses, comma, and then you can just add another variable. And the variable declaration statement can be a very long line, variables separated by commas. And at the very end, do not forget the semicolon, because that's a way of Easy Language knowing that this is the end of my statement, and I'm going to go on to something else. Boris is saying, could you refer to a formal description of Easy Language also? Is it only study, or one can use it to code and execute a trading strategy? Yes, both. Boris, Easy Language is TradeStation's proprietary programming language. It allows you to pretty much do or create any trading tool or study inside of TradeStation. In fact, all studies and strategy components to be exact, are already created for you in Easy Language, and you can open up those studies and strategies inside of TradeStation. But the fact that Easy Language exists means that you can take that and create your own. So it is not only for studies, it is also available for you to create a strategy and have that strategy generate trades for you. All right, so thank you for that. Thank you for your questions. So once you declare a variable, and if you're not familiar with programming, it's totally fine. I'm not a programmer myself. I didn't go to school for software. programming, but I consider EasyLanguage something that is fairly simple to learn and fairly simple to customize. There are areas of EasyLanguage of course, that are going to be much more advanced, and you're going to, create much more complex type of calculations. But if you're interested in creating simple studies like this one, it is something that everyone that's using TradeStation can do. So the first line is my declaration, where I declare that I'm going to be using a variable called down bar, which doesn't say down, DN bar. And then the next line, what it does, it defines, it tells EasyLanguage what DN bar stands for. It is equal to the close minus the close, minus, the close less than, that's a less than operator, close is less than the close, and the one that you see there in square brackets is a historical reference on the chart, which is pretty cool, because by having that one inside square brackets, you're telling, EasyLanguage to go back 1 bar. 1 bar. So depending on the interval or the time frame you're using on the chart, it'll be exactly 1 bar. If you have a daily chart, it'll compare the closing price of today against the closing price of yesterday or the prior, trading day. If you're on a 5-minute chart, it'll be the previous 5-minute bar. So that 1 is just the prior bar. If the condition is true, close is less than the close 1 bar ago, this expression is either true or false. That's the reason why in the first line of this code, the declaration statement, we have to initialize the variable as a true or false variable, and we can do that by entering the word false inside parentheses. Okay, hopefully everyone follows me. These are just 2 simple lines of code. One is a declaration of variables, and the second line is an assignment of variables. And then once you have the declaration and the assignment, then it's just a matter of creating your conditions. Remember that the Paintbar by nature is something that only shows up if the condition is true. So the condition of this study is if down bar, then begin. Meaning that if it finds a down bar, okay, let's start doing what we were supposed to do. When you reference the variable name like this, you're looking for a true condition. But notice that I don't have to say if the close is less than the close 1 bar ago, then begin. I don't have to type that up again. Why? Because I already assigned that relationship to my variable. So all I need to do is reference the variable name, and I'll know exactly what I mean by that. So what is it going to do? First, plot PB. By the way, this plot statement, plot PB, PB stands for paint bar. And inside the parentheses, you're going to tell EasyLanguage how much of the bar to paint. If it has the words high, comma, low, you're pretty much telling EasyLanguage that you want to paint from high to low. Now, this is very cool because on a paint bar, you can choose to paint certain sections of the bar. The fact that you have the ability to tell where you want to start the paint or where you want to end the paint is pretty cool, because you can create very, very nice looking studies where you paint just half or 1/3 or a fraction of the bar and not the full thing. And then, what you see right here with the quotation marks, that's just a label, a user created label. Like, for example, if you want to identify that plot statement, and this is up, down, then you can just put in a label. This is optional, by the way. This is just creating labels for your plot statements, so that if you have an indicator that has multiple plots, and I'll give you an example, MACD has 3 different plots. It has, the difference, the MACD average, and it has all these different lines, and each one will have a specific name. If you don't add a name to the plots, later you're going to find that it's difficult to identify which one's which if they're just using the default names, which is plot 1, plot 2, and plot 3. So these custom names sometimes come in very handy when you want to modify a particular plot, but it's optional. Again, it just makes your code a little bit more organized. And the other action that you want to do is set plot color of plot 1 is implied that your PB here is plot 1 to red. and then you have an end statement. So whenever you have the condition that is true, meaning that you have a down bar where the close is lower than the previous close, it's going to paint that bar red. And that's it. A lot of times, we get that question a lot on TradeStation, like if you open up an open, high, low, close bar, all the bars are the same color. Not in a candlestick, because candlestick by nature is going to paint the candles red and green, but an open, high, low, close bar doesn't. Now we can create this on TradeStation, but we already have it built in, so you don't have to create it yourself. And then I have a series of steps here that you have to follow when you create EasyLanguage. It's just as a reference. You don't have to follow the steps to the T, but you have to open up the EasyLanguage development environment, which we're going to get to in a little moment. Then you have to select the study type that you're going to be creating. So the first thing you do is decide, okay, what is it that I'm going to create? Am I going to create a study that plots lines on top of the candles? Do I want my study to be on a separate subgraph? Do I want to create a show me, which is a little dot that marks a candle? Do I want to create a paint bar that changes the color of the study? Do I want to create a strategy that generates buys and sells? So at this point, you have to decide, okay, what is it that I'm going to start creating now? And then you go to File, New, and select the type of study that you're going to be creating, because that's a big decision to make at the very beginning, because afterwards you cannot change that. Once you start with a specific type of document, you have to finish on that type, and because it cannot be changed. If you make an error, you can probably start from scratch again. Not probably, you can start from scratch again and maybe transfer some elements using copy and paste. And a lot of times I find myself creating a study, and I write all my lines of code, and then I say, maybe I want a strategy out of this. So rather than typing it all up again, I just copy, highlight, copy, and then paste it inside of a strategy if that's what I wanted to do from the beginning. You write your code. Verify is the process that EasyLanguage uses to make sure that you don't have any errors. If you do find errors, you fix the errors, you verify again. We go to the properties if you have to change properties of your study, and then you verify one more time. And then we go back to the chart to see how this study looks, okay? Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions here. Ben is asking, only close is present closing bar value? Yes, when you use the word close in EasyLanguage, it represents the closing price of the bar, specifically when it's referenced historically. Now, in real time, when the bar is updating tick by tick, the word close will reference that last tick, which represents, the closing price of the bar that is currently building. The bar hasn't closed as an event kind of thing, but the closing price still is the last traded price. So yeah, technically, when you apply the EasyLanguage to a chart, any historical reference will reference specifically the closing price of a historical bar. But on the current bar that's being built in real time, tick by tick, the closing price will be updated with the last traded price. What if we have more conditions like and, slash, or operators? You can mix and match any operators here and make it as complex as you need it to be. Just make sure that you double check your conditions to make sure that they're providing you accurate information. Did I understand your statement that EasyLanguage is TS proprietary language? Boris, EasyLanguage can be anything you want it to be in terms of if it's bar driven or event driven. A lot of the core EasyLanguage that we usually do in our classes, which is leveraging EasyLanguage, is bar based. So most of the time, yes, we're going to reference data from the bars and let the bars drive the study. But the study can also be event driven. Like, for example, I'll give you a clear example of an event driven tool, chart trading. I'm not sure if you've used chart trading, and if you haven't, you can enable it on a chart. Chart trading is a tool that is created or was created using EasyLanguage. And a lot of the events that it uses to generate actions is the clicks on the chart. So it's not data driven, but you can click on a chart and that event of a click response. I mean, you can have easy language response to that click event. Let's see. Venu says, can we apply Paintbar studies into Bitcoin strategy? Easy Language works on the TradeStation desktop. So if you're trading Bitcoin on the TradeStation crypto platform, then we don't have that integration on that platform at the moment. You can probably, build a chart on Bitcoin data or cryptocurrencies on the TradeStation desktop. Our data may be limited as to what we provide. We may have some Bitcoin futures that are available, but if you're trading on TradeStation crypto, then Easy Language is not available there yet, okay? Okay, let's go ahead and take a look. And the follow-up question, I create an automation strategy for Bitcoin. Not at this moment, because in order for you to trade Bitcoin directly, you need to trade on TradeStation crypto. If you wanted to trade some Bitcoin futures, that are available through, I believe it's the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, yes, you can generate a strategy or create a strategy and have it trade futures on Bitcoin. But if you want to trade the currency itself directly, you need to do that on TradeStation crypto, and that's not linked to the desktop at the moment, okay? In fact, I understand you can open up your crypto platform inside of the desktop, but it's not a direct running platform on the desktop. So there's no strategies that you can run on Bitcoin. So hopefully that clarifies the Venu. But if you're interested in doing strategy automation, you can do it on futures for Bitcoin, not the Bitcoin itself, okay? Let's go over here to my TradeStation platform and talk about a few things related to Paintbar, all right? All right, let me switch here to a high-low close bar. So style, open, high-low close. The reason why I'm switching to this type of chart is because you can see the color application a little bit better than in a candlestick. Although you can stay in candlestick, Paintbar still work there, but in a candlestick chart, you're working with the red and the green, which is the default there. Although, if I want to stay on candles, let me show you something cool. I can go here to candle, and if I go here to style, not style, let me go to data and edit symbol. Now, if you want to go to data and edit symbol, most of the time I use a shortcut. So I double click on the candle. If you double click on any of the candles, it takes you to customize symbol. And here under style, you can use that. You can see that for bar components, you have an up color, the down color, which is red, and the wick. There's a checkbox here that says, candlestick with trend. Okay, so it's not available for candlestick, but it is available for candlestick with trend. Everybody sees this checkbox that says use the same color weight component with each bar type. If I switch to candlestick, that option's grayed out. But if I choose candlestick with trend, it's available. If you choose this option to make all the candles the same color, pretty much that's what the checkbox is doing for you. You can see a preview of that down here. And if I say, well, let me make these a gray, all right, so that we strip the color out of the candles and still remaining candlestick. I'm going to click OK. Take a look at what my candlestick chart looks like. I've just stripped the color out of the candles. I'm looking at filled and hollow, which is, the original way that candlesticks were analyzed. You knew that an up candle was an up candle if it was hollow, and you knew that a candlestick was a down candle if it was filled. In modern times, we added or applied this red and green to be a little bit more visible and enhance the visual. But this is the original way that candlesticks were, looked at. And I want to turn them gray because we're going to start applying some color to these candles based on certain conditions. So what I was saying earlier, for example, I'm going to go to studies and add studies. And let's take a look at the RSI. Just something that we are all familiar with. RSI, I'm going to click OK. let me make the style a little bit different here. I'm gonna make the RSI line thicker, the overbought thicker, and the oversold thicker. I do that on all my presentations just because the studies look nicer and more prominent on the screen. Let me go ahead and click OK. There we go. So this is a daily chart of Bank of America. We see the symbol over here on the left-hand side. And I have this whole indicator at the bottom to pinpoint, oversold and overbought areas. If I'm looking at the oversold, we can see different areas where it happened. Now, I'm not sure if you use RSI, but that sometimes can correlate, to a bullish signal if it returns inside the channel. Sometimes, it works, sometimes it doesn't. But on the overbought side, you also see that. So what I'm going to do, what I'm going to be doing right now is I'm going to create a paint bar that is going to tell me when Bank of America was overbought and oversold without having to have the study at the very bottom taking up all this real estate on my chart. That's the nature of having these type of studies that go on top of the candle so that you can get these same evaluations without having to have a full-blown study. So let me go here. Well, the first thing that I want to do is open up the code of the RSI. If you're not really familiar with functions and how indicators are built, open up the default code and let's take a look at it. Right click, and I'm right clicking on the lines. I'm going to edit EasyLanguage for RSI. This will open up the TradeStation development environment. This is the EasyLanguage syntax that calculates my RSI. And I may want to use some of these components to create my indicator. Now, I see that there's a lot of inputs. Remember that one of the things that TradeStation allows you to do is create this interface that allows you to interact with your study on the front end. We may want to add that here as well. We have one variable, RSI value. We have the assignment. Everybody remembers this on the PDF. You have to pretty much tell EasyLanguage what your variable stands for, and it stands for the RSI. We haven't looked at an example of a magenta word, but RSI is a magenta word. Why? Because it's considered a function, and TradeStation has hundreds of different functions that are already built in and created for you. Like the RSI calculation is not something you have to write yourself. You can just use the function and it has the RSI calculation for you built in. It just needs two parameters, which is what is it that you're calculating the RSI on, and for what's the length. The default parameter for the RSI is 14. We can see it up here. So some of these elements I'm going to transfer over to my code, not everything because I don't need everything. So let me go ahead and start creating my Paintbar. So I'm going to go here to File, New. I can go to File, New, and you get all the types of studies, or you can go to this little drop down on that first toolbar button, which is what I mostly do when I want to create a study, and I select what I want to create. I'm going to do a Paintbar. All right, so on the Paintbar, one of the instructions that was in the PDF was that we encourage everyone to create custom names with a prefix, not custom names, but most importantly with a prefix, so that you can identify where your custom work is. If you do any random names here on your custom studies, they're going to be mixed with all the studies that come on TradeStation, and they're going to be sorted in alphabetical order. So it's going to come to a point where if you start creating custom studies and they're pretty much added to the already list of studies that is there, you're going to have a hard time, picking and choosing what's yours. So having this prefix so that every custom study starts with the same thing allows you to group them together. On my screen, I start my indicator name always with an exclamation JN. I use exclamation because exclamation usually sorts to the very top. So I know that in my list of studies, they're going to be towards the top. So JN are my initials, and then I just add the name of my study. If you keep the same prefix on every study, they're all going to be lumped together. So it becomes very convenient. And this will be RSI paint. I'm just going to call it RSI paint. And I'm going to click OK. Okay, so let's see. What do we do? Venu is asking, do we have any library link where I can see all the reserved keywords and functions of EasyLanguage? For sure, Venu, and thank you for that question. Over here on the right-hand side, you have a dictionary. So I would open up the dictionary. We have a lot of elements here that you can open up, but I would, if you're just getting started, open up the EasyLanguage.ell. These are just libraries that you can look at. If I open up the EasyLanguage.ell, then I have further, categories that I can take a look at. If you're looking for the user functions, they're going to be at the very bottom. See, user functions. If I click it, I have a whole list of things that I can select and use inside of the code. And if I scroll down, you'll find the one that we're using right now, which is the RSI. And RSI gives you a brief, if you click on it, it'll just give you a brief description of what the RSI does and an example of how the RSI function should be used inside of your code, okay? So let me go ahead and I'm gonna just bring some of the inputs that are here. Let me copy some of this, not everything, because I'm not sure if you've been in my classes before, but a lot of times I don't like the fact they added a new feature in EasyLanguage, which is called the tooltips. And for each one of the inputs that is available here, there's a tooltip that gets added to show you what to add in there. Let me show you, because this is actually something that was to be implemented, and it was actually implemented already. This allows me to go over here to my TradeStation. This is like parentheses for you guys to know this. If I double click on my RSI and I go to my inputs, I can hover over the name of the input, and this is the tooltip that shows up. When I started, erasing that information, I was erasing it just for simplicity, but I'm just showing you where that functionality shows up. Anytime you hover over an input, you get the tooltips. Enter the amount of bars using the RSI calculation. All that text that shows up when you hover over an input is what you see right here in each one of the inputs here. Is it necessary? No, you don't need all this. So what I do sometimes, because I don't need, these tooltips on the ones that I create, I'm creating them so I know what they mean, So what I do is I remove all this just to simplify the view. This is just creating the tooltip area. Now I do leave the commas, because as one of you asked, how do I create a list of things that I want to declare? You can do this by just leaving the commas. I'm going to put this all in one line. I don't need all this. And I'm going to remove the colors, because I'm not going to use the colors this way. Okay, so all I need is the length, the oversold, and the overbought. And the price, in this case, is the close. Let me go back here to the RSI. The variables, I'm going to use the exact same calculations. So I'm going to copy these 3 lines, go back to my custom code, and put them in there. Okay, now the spacing is not relevant. I can add extra lines. I can put spaces in between commas just to separate things a little bit better. It's all for readability. For example, over here in my inputs declaration, you can see that I left out the spaces after the comma. It's okay. EasyLanguage is not sensitive to those spaces. It actually strips the spaces out of the code to make it a little bit more efficient. The spaces are just for you so that the code is a little bit more readable. So we have our inputs, we have our variable declaration, and we have our variable assignment. Notice that in the parameters of the function, we're using the word price. Why? Because it's right here in the inputs. So this is an RSI of the closing price. And that's why close is inside parentheses. But this input gives you the flexibility of changing that and saying, okay, what if I do the RSI on the high? If I'm going to look on the overbought side, maybe it makes sense to calculate the RSI on the high prices. Or if you're looking at the oversold side, you want to create or calculate the RSI on the low. This little input gives you that flexibility, and whatever you put in there in the inputs gets plugged in here inside of the function. Same word, we're using the word. And the same here for length. It has a 14, and we have the interface again, which allows you to change this parameter to any number you want. Technically, yes, I could have typed up the word close here and the number 14. Now that is also something that works, but the fact that I have some inputs up here, it allows me to have that interface or that flexibility, okay? Hopefully that's clear. There we go, all right? And once I have all my elements in here, then I start doing my conditions, which are going to be different than the RSI. Let me see if the RSI has some conditions. RSI value is greater than over bot, then else. Okay, I'm going to use this exactly as it's here. I'm going to change a few things though. This is the color criteria. We have some alert criteria here as well. I can, what I'm showing you is that you can take any built-in study and grab the components out of them and bring them inside of your code. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you're trying to use elements that already exist, yeah, dive in, look for the pieces that you need, bring them over to your custom code, and then build on top of that, okay? Let me copy this. Let me go here to my code. All right, so if RSI value is greater than overbought, then set plot color. I don't need a set plot color. This is a Paintbar. And we knew from the example that I showed you in the PDF that we need a plot statement, plot PB. And we're going to do from the high to the low. We don't need this. And this will be, we're going to call this overbought. Sometimes we need a custom label. Remember that I talked about this. This is optional. Else, if RSI value is less than oversold, then I'm going to use the same plot statement here. Plot PB, high to low. This is actually doesn't change. I'm going to just change this. High to low. And of course, this is not oversold. This is this is not overbought. This is oversold. Now, it's interesting because we need the colors. We haven't specified what the colors are. These are the plots that paints. It's the action of putting the paint on the bar, but we're not specifying which color to add. If you look at the example on the PowerPoint that I sent you, let me see. Yeah, you see, it's a little different because we have the condition if so and so, then begin. We use the word begin when we have multiple actions, and the multiple actions here are first you plot and then you set the plot color. That's what we need inside of our code. So I'm going to go back here to our custom code. Notice how we have the conditions. We don't have a begin. So that's what I'm going to add here, begin. Because I want to have different actions depending on where the condition is. So if the RSI value is greater than the overbought, then begin. We plot, this is overbought. I need a semicolon at the very end of this. And then we have set plot color. And then we have to put in a 1 in here because it's plot 1. And then we choose the color. Now, I know that my candlesticks, I turn them gray. And if it's overbought, I don't know, let's make these cyan. Or I can make them blue. There's different ways in which you can specify color inside of EasyLanguage. Notice that I'm using words that exist as names. So I can type in the name of a color and it understands exactly what I want to use. Now you have access to the millions of colors that are part of the Windows color palette. And we even have RGB functions that you can use inside your code to access a variety of colors. But these are colors that exist inside of the language that you can use right out of the box by just typing up their names. If you were to look here at the dictionary, you would see that under EasyLanguage, there's a colors category. If I click here, then it gives you a list of different colors that exist that you can use right out of the box. We have magenta, red, white, yellow, they exist as names. Not a lot, If you were to want a more elegant color, a little bit more sophisticated color, you probably want to go here to the RGB function and then try to use a color that way. Okay, so I'm gonna use just a regular color blue, close parentheses, semicolon, and then I need an end here. Anytime you have a begin, make sure that you have a matching end. Otherwise, you'll get an error. Every time you have a begin, you should have an end. So I'm going to do the same thing here. If it's oversold, set plot color, but in this case, it's going to be red. And then I'm just going to end my statement. Is that it? I don't know. Let's verify this. I verified, and since I copied from the RSI code, I have this lingering else that I don't need anymore. I separated the if-then statement because there's a type of statement that is an if-then else. So if this happens, then do this, and else, if that doesn't happen, then do this other thing. So we're not using that syntax anymore. We've separated the two statements into separate if-then statements. If it's overbought, do this. But if it's oversold, do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove that else. And let's verify one more time. This plot has been defined using a different name. Okay, that's because, okay, so, so maybe we just can't do it here inside of a paint bar. What it's trying to tell me is that I already assigned plot PB. Now, plot PB is a type of plot statements that doesn't have any number. Like, for example, when you have plots in an indicator, you have plot 1, plot 2, plot 3. So in an indicator, if I would get this error message that says it's already been used, I just use a different or the next number. If I'm already using plot 1 or plot 2, I'll use plot 3 then. But in this case, plot PB doesn't have a number, so I don't think I can use this syntax where you have, if something happens, plot this, but if this other thing happens, then plot this other thing. So maybe what I can do is, instead of naming them differently, I'll just use the same name. So let's do RSI paint. Okay, so I'll call this RSI paint and RSI paint. So they're both the same thing. They're just being applied a different color based on the condition. I think this will work. Let's verify this. By the way, verify, I didn't tell you guys, but I'm using the green check mark right here at the very top. I can also right click on the code and verify, or I can press the F3 on my keyboard. All those do the exact same thing. I'm clicking the check mark here, and then I verify. You can see right here at the bottom that I have no errors, no warnings. Let's take a look. I'm going to take this indicator and put it on a chart and see what it looks like. Let me go here to my trade station. All right, this is the chart that we were looking at just a moment ago. I'm going to go to studies, add studies. Since I created a paint bar, remember to click on the paint bar category here on the left. I started my indicator with the name !JN, so that's going to be towards the very top. And here's !JN. You can see that I have a few !JN, and they're all grouped together. So it's easy for me to know, oh, these are all my custom paint bars. I created this called the RSI paint. I can prompt for editing, but let's just see what it looks like if I don't, and I'll click OK. There we go. Does it align with the indicator right here at the bottom? It does. Where we have this overbought condition, you can see how the candle right here is painted blue. Where we have a few candles here that were oversold, that gets painted right here on my candlestick chart already. So this is technically doing exactly what I was intending it to do. Allow me to remove the RSI from the bottom, because now I have a study that does exactly the same thing, but instead of taking this whole space at the bottom, I'm able to see where the overbought or the oversold bars are. Pretty cool, huh? One more thing that I can do is change the sensitivity of these indicators. For example, if I double click on this RSI and I change the inputs to 7 to shorten the calculation of that RSI, of course, I'm going to get more overbought and oversold levels because of the sensitivity. But the fact that we allowed ourselves the same flexibility on our Paintbar where we have those inputs, it allows us to go here. Let me see if I can, if I double click, it'll take me, oh, it actually did. I thought it was going to take me to customize window. If I double click on a candle that doesn't have the Paintbar, it'll go to customize symbol. But if I double click on a candle that has the Paintbar, it'll take me to customize the Paintbar. Pretty cool, huh? I can go here to the inputs and then do the exact same adjustments. Maybe I want to make the RSI a little bit more sensitive. So I shorten the length to 7 and click OK. Now you can see how my RSIs are aligned, but you can see the calculations exactly the same. Anytime that the RSI here is overbought, I'm going to get blue candles right here on the top. And anytime that my candlestick or my RSI is oversold, my candlesticks are going to be painted red. All right, let's see. Let's take a look at a few questions here. Let's see. Boris, RSI depends on implicit time frame size, which is defined by the plot. What if I want to define multiple time frames? Boris, on that sense, you know, EasyLanguage is sensitive to what's been assigned to the chart itself. So what I'm applying here is an RSI on a daily bar. So any different calculations on a different time frame, they have to be handled on the front end, not on the EasyLanguage. EasyLanguage allows you to bring other data streams. That type of EasyLanguage is what we call the object-oriented EasyLanguage. But if you're going to create a multi-data chart, for example, right here, I can go to data and I can go to add a symbol. And I can add, you know, Bank of America again, let's say on an intraday basis, like a 60-minute, and have my indicator calculate the same exact RSI, but on a 60-minute time frame. But it's done on the front end by creating a multi-data chart. Venu is asking, can you please draw a horizontal bar with value 50 and color on RSI using EasyLanguage? Yes. For example, if you wanted to add a line at 50 here, let me show you that very simply. Let me go back here to the RSI indicator. You know that you have 3 plots. You have the plot for the RSI value, and then you have the overbought and the oversold. A lot of times, I do suggest that if you're going to make modifications to the code of the built-in studies, you create your own version. And that way, you're not, you know, modifying what's built into the platform. And you can always go back to the original. But if you wanted to add an additional line here, let me save this as a different indicator. I'm going to go here to File, Save As. I'm going to call this !JN RSI. I'm going to keep the same name, but I'm just going to add the prefix !JN because that would be like my version of the RSI. And all I need to do is come here where you see the plot statements and plot 4, because 1, 2, 3 are already in use. And what I do is I just add a line at 50. Now that's a simple way of adding a line. It doesn't have, you know, the labels. It doesn't have whatever value you put inside parentheses is exactly what's going to be plotted bar by bar. Let me verify this. Now, what I want to do though is make that the style that I want. So I'm going to right click here, which I didn't do on my Paintbar because Paintbars, they go on top of the candles regardless. But here I have to right click and go to properties because I want to make sure that I go to my chart style. Notice the plots here. I only have names for plots where you have those quotations. Take a look at the one that I added, which was plot number 4, and I added the 50. There's no custom name. It just says plot 4. Now, this is simple because that's the one that I added. But if you wanted to make this a little bit better and add a label, you could. You can say, this is my, 50. And then verify it again. When I go back into the properties and go to the chart style, you can see that instead of saying plot 4, it says 50. And I can make that, whatever type of line that I want. Maybe if I want to make it a dotted line, I can do that. And maybe I want to make it let me go to chart color, and let's make that line, a dark gray. Then click OK. And then I verify again. You see that on the last page of the PDF, the process where you type up the code, you verify, you go to properties, change whatever styles and colors, verify again, and then you can apply your study. So now, if I remove this RSI from the bottom, I go to studies, add study. When I go to the indicator section, scroll to the top where I find my exclamation JN, which is what I called it. Here's my RSI. And notice that my RSI changed. Now, in addition to having the over bottom, the oversold line, I have that dotted line crossing right at the center at 50. So those are, some modifications you can do to built-in studies and make sure that the studies you're using are exactly what you need, okay? Let's see. Boris is asking, what I meant was if the code could be run independently of a plot. If yes, how? Every indicator in TradeStation has to run on the actual bar. So you have to add it as a study. Now, the question here is, can EasyLanguage allow you to create something that is independent from the data or the bars? Yes, that would be more like a trading app. A trading app is something that would be added right here to the top of menu. So you can build a trading app that has separate functionality and is independent from the data on a chart. When you go to the development environment, you go to the type of study would be, you go to the drop down here and you have the ability to create a trading app, which would be added as an application to your TradeStation platform. Ricardo says, so the close of the bar has to be over 70 or under 30, correct? Yes. In the example that I created, my indicator had to be above 70 or below 30, which are the default levels. If I wanted to, I can change those. But if you look at my indicator up here, the oversold is 30 and the overbought is 70. You have the ability to change those. But yeah, the paint bar only painted if the values were above 70 or below 30. Okay, and great, that's it. So Drew, the email is education@tradestation.com. Feel free to send an email. Manolo's going to put that email address again right here in the chat. Ricardo is asking, may I set conditions of all bar range? Not sure what you mean by that, but I suppose you can, Ricardo. When we're talking about bar range, are you talking about historical amount of historical data, or the range, high and low? But if it's both, then yes, the answer is yes to both. So it's very flexible. You're going to be surprised at the many things you can do with EasyLanguage. Yes, definitely. That's something you can reference. In fact, there's a built-in function called range that you can reference right out of the box. Okay, guys, that's it. That's my class for today. Just a way of introducing, paint bars to you and how to get them started from scratch. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you in my afternoon class. We have a class this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern time that is going to be on OCO or custom OCOs and OSOs. If you're interested in using those, feel free to join me, okay? Great having you today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye, everyone.